Hey guys, here we are for chapter 4, biodiversity and evolution. This chapter kind of starts off slow and picks up steam, so here we go. All right, first thing, we're going to start off again in a new chapter with a core case study. Why are amphibians vanishing? We have noticed that since 1970, some 200 species of frogs have gone extinct. It's not just one reason, it's lots of different reasons, but amphibians seem to be one of these kind of key species that give us a hint of something that's coming. Amphibians are some of the first animals that crawled out on land, obviously, and have stayed adapted to this. Their skin allows them, they have to stay moist, they kind of breathe through their skin, making them a little more sensitive to things like pesticides, etc., as opposed to some other organisms with thicker skin. Since they absorb water in through their skin and kind of use their skin to breathe, makes them a little more sensitive. So these types of animals are biological indicators. If something's going wrong with them, we realize there may be something going wrong in general. It gives us a first indicator of a problem in environment. But amphibians actually play pretty important ecological roles within their communities. They're eating insects. Once again, it's just part of this food web. You remove any one part of the food web and it has effects on others. It's not eating some organisms and other organisms can't eat them. Also, some of their skin secretions have actually been a very important part of a lot of pharmaceutical products, a lot of things we make. Now from movies and etc., we know that, like the tree frog dart, you can use poison to get them. Well, anything that's used for one purpose quite often has others as well. So losing these frogs as they become extinct, if they had properties that we could exploit, make use of, well, they're no longer around. But anyway, one of these core case studies, amphibians, once again, look at them as a biological indicator. If something starts happening to them first, it may wind up begin happening for other species as well. So we're going to look at, in section 1, the classification. Basically, we're going to look at classification of life. It's not really phrased that way, but you should have studied that in some shape, form, or fashion with Carolus Linnaeus, his system, binomial nomenclatures, our genus, species. Hopefully all of this is sort of ringing bells in your head. Oh yeah, I remember. So let's go ahead and run through this. It should be a review, but just make sure you bring it back to the forefront of your head so that we can move along with it. All right, classification of living things is based on their cell structure. In the broadest sense, we have prokaryotic organisms and we have eukaryotic organisms. In this case, the word pro is meaning like pre, before. We think some of the earliest life forms were the prokaryote, before having a nucleus. Eukaryotic organisms all have a nucleus within their cell, which contains the DNA, chromosomes, etc. A prokaryote has no nucleus, so the DNA and everything is just loose within the cell membrane. Now, all prokaryotes are bacteria. Now, the bacteria get broken down again into pretty large categories. We have the archaebacteria and eubacteria. Archaebacteria, also known as archaea, live in extreme environments. But these are the only forms of prokaryotes. It has to really be a bacteria, either a archaebacteria, like archaea, or what we refer to as the eubacteria, not the archaea. Once again, this book breaks things down a little different than others, so let's make sure we're on the same page. All prokaryotes are going to be a form of bacteria, either the archaebacteria or the bacteria. They don't have a distinct nucleus. All their internal parts are just inside of the membrane. Then we have eukaryotic. Second broad thing. This is everything that's not a bacteria. animals, plants, fungi, etc. Everything that's multicellular and some things that are not multicellular are eukaryotic. They have a nucleus. Now, when we go into our taxonomic classification, this is your kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. You can always remember it by, King Philip came over for my grandma's spaghetti, sorry, there's no mine. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Kingdom being the largest grouping, species being the smallest grouping, taking us all the way down to a singular type of life form, like all Bengal tigers fit into one specific species. All black bears. Not all bears, but the black bears are a specific species. So let's break down these 6 kingdoms. All right. The Eubacteria and Archaebacteria, prokaryotic into a eukaryotic cell. Looking at that aspect. So all the Eubacteria or bacteria, Archaebacteria are bacteria-like. They've come up with a lot of differences in them. They weren't discovered until the 80s. We just thought they were a funny form of bacteria. But they live in extreme environments. We find bacteria in every environment in the planet. And the Archaeobacteria we tend to find in the extreme environments. Too hot, too salty, too deep underground, too cold, something for most other forms of life, but the Archaeobacteria can survive there. So that's the first two different forms of bacteria. Then we go into the other 4. Protists. These are protozoan. Mainly, these are made up of single-celled, very simple organisms. They are either plant-like, they are animal-like, or they are fungi-like. Personally, I kind of call this the throwaway category. We didn't know they existed until we had invented the microscope and began seeing these little wee beasties down in our water droplets. How do we classify them? Well, some appear like the amoeba, a little more animal-like. Some, like the Eugenia, seem to be more plant-like, or some forms of algae. Others, like yeast, appear to be more fungus-like. But they were very simple organisms, almost all of them microscopic, and we created another kingdom, Protists. Once again, very simple organisms, but they're plant-like, animal-like, or fungus-like in this kingdom. Then we get into kind of the big 3, if you will. Plants, fungi, and animals. All right, plants. Plants have to be autotrophs. They are producers. They can produce their own energy from the sun. This is why fungi have their own kingdom. Of course, originally there were only plants and animals. So we would put fungi in with plant. But then we broke down and said, hey, a plant has to be able to produce its own energy. We realized a fungus isn't doing that. Fungi are consumers. They're just consuming something that's already dead. They're not producing their own. So they had their own kingdom. So plants, producers, fungi, they wind up being decomposers. Now this is made up of mushrooms, mold, mildew, yeast fall into this category, and then animals. Animals can evolve invertebrate or vertebrate. Most animals on the planet actually falling into the invertebrate category. Insects fall into this, jellyfish, worms, many things on the planet are actually invertebrate. About 80% of all animal life is invertebrate. That gets your 6 broad kingdoms. Archaea, bacteria, protist, plant, fungi, animals. 6 kingdoms. Now, let's look at humans, for instance. How do we break these things down? Well, we could do this obviously with any organism. The largest one is kingdom, animal. These have to be multicellular, eukaryotic organisms. Then we break down from kingdom into the phylum, Chordata. These are animals, when we're born, we have a notochord. This notochord is what tends to grow up in or come into be our vertebrate backbone. So animals in the chordata tend to fall into this subphylum of vertebrate. We tend to have backbones. Then we fall into the class Mammalia. We're mammals, warm-blooded, fur around our body, tend to bear live young and produce milk to feed our young, Mammalia. Then our order is primate, organisms, animals that either live in trees or used to, came from other animals that did. Primates, this involves most apes and monkeys in existence today, along with anything in the hominid family. Hominids are animals that are use two-legged locomotion, propulsion. And we have some animal lemurs, etc., that tend to stand up and run on twos for locomotion. Then we go from the family hominid to the genus Homo. This is upright animals with large brains. So that separates from some other animals that might be biped locomoting. Then we fall into the species sapiens. These are animals with sparse body hair, with a high forehead and large brain. And then we are further broken down into kind of a subspecies, sapiens sapiens, which is really just an animal capable of sophisticated and cultural evolution. So that takes us. So we go from, we're in the kingdom animal, in the phylum Chordata, into the class Mammalia, into the order primate, into the family hominid, into the genus Homo, into the species sapien, and into our final kind of subspecies sapien sapiens. But that's what kind of classifies a human, and we can do that for any other organism. We could even take a dog and it's going to go into the Animalia, Chordata, mammal, but at that point it breaks off until we actually get down to canine in its species. And you'll have to forgive me, I do not recall all of the individual steps for a dog. Earth's organisms, we are many and varied. We estimate somewhere between 7 and 100 million species in existence. It's a guess. Honestly, the best guess is probably somewhere between like 7 and 10 million. The higher numbers thrown out because we just don't know, especially when we start looking at microscopic organisms. Even though there's a lot of people have looked and examined, we haven't gone into all habitats, all areas. Much of our ocean is unexplored. Many types of grasses have yet to be classified. There's lots and lots of stuff out there that we have not specifically identified yet. So anyway, somewhere around 7 to 10 million species exist. 2 million of them have actually been identified. Of those 2 million we've identified, about half of them are insects. Now, insects are very important. They do pollination. They're part of this food web, food chain again. And with insects, many of them can reproduce very rapidly. So because of this rapid turnover, they actually have the ability to produce new genetic traits. Since they are sexually reproducing, you have two distinct organisms trading their genetic material, and they have a unique organism from it. So we're going to have slightly different coloring, slightly different sizes, different speeds, etc. And this really moves along their genetic traits, which also includes things like pesticide resistance. So you're a farmer and you go out there and you check your corn, you go, oh my goodness, I've got insects, bugs eating all my corn. You get on the phone and you call up somebody, I need my crop dusted, I need you to put insecticide down. And so they call up and said, yep, we will use pesticide A. It's been working really, really great. And they come out and they spray your crops. And you go out the next day and you go, yay, all the worms are dying, whatever it is, the grasshoppers that are eating your food are dead. Most of them are dead, died off, save your crop, and you move on. But not every one of them died. 1, 2% simply survived the pesticide because their body was able to neutralize the pesticide into some harmless chemical in their body. Killed most of their buddies, but not them, simply because they had an immune system, they had a gene in their body that processed the chemical and it didn't kill them. So next year, you order the pesticide again, the pesticide comes through, but it doesn't kill those grasshoppers. Well, who are those grasshoppers having sex with? Yeah, grasshoppers in the same field. Well, the grasshoppers in that same field are the same ones like them. They didn't die from it. They passed that trait on to their offspring, and they multiply quickly. There's nobody else. There's plenty of food, plenty of space for them, and now this new breed of grasshopper expands in your field. And after a year or so, you go out and they're killing them, and you order that. We sprayed, and the bugs are still here. You call the company, you say, hey, that stuff isn't working. It's no good. You got a bad batch. I said, nah, you just have insects that are now resistant to this particular chemical. So we're going to come spray with chemical B now. And you spray chemical B, and once again, most of them die again, but not all. So now you have organisms that are resistant to chemical A and chemical B, and they reproduce, etc. Pesticide resistance. This is just an aspect of evolution, which we'll get into later of the chapter. This idea of pesticide resistance is important. It's a part of evolutionary function, adaptation. Well, as far as classifying living things and life, that's it. Hopefully this is stuff you're pretty familiar with, and we will see you next time. Take care, guys.